He had everything, wealth, privilege, and a mansion filled with servants. Yet behind all that luxury was a secret no amount of money could hide. He couldn't pass a single test. Tutors failed, teachers gave up, and shame followed him everywhere. Then came the new maid. She was black, quiet, and overlooked by everyone. Just another worker in the millionaire's house. But what happened next would shatter pride, expose prejudice, and change both of their lives forever. Because sometimes the person the world looks down on is the only one who can lift you up. In a world of wealth and privilege, the mansion stood like a fortress of power. Its marble halls echoed with footsteps of servants. Its garden bloomed with colors money could buy. And its library was filled with books no one bothered to read. At the center of this luxury was the millionaire's only son. Born into everything yet struggling with the one thing wealth could guarantee: learning. Science baffled him, equations blurred together, and every test ended in failure. For the family, it was more than just poor grades. It was a stain on their pride. Tutors were hired and dismissed. Teachers replaced one after another, each leaving with the same frustration. The boy simply couldn't learn. Whispers began to spread. How could the son of a man with endless influence and money be so hopeless in something as ordinary as school? And then, quietly, she arrived. A new maid. She was black, young, and underestimated from the moment she stepped into the household. To the family, she was invisible, just another pair of hands to polish the silver and scrub the floors. No one imagined she would ever matter beyond her chores. But destiny works in silence. As the boy struggled deeper into shame, and the family buried him under expectations, an unlikely connection was about to form, one that no one in that mansion could have predicted, and one that would reveal the true meaning of intelligence, strength, and humanity. The days in the mansion always looked the same: endless routines, polished perfection, and the boy sitting at his desk staring blankly at pages he could not understand. Teachers came with diagrams, notes, and experiments, yet their voices turned into noise the moment they spoke. Each failed test became another quiet humiliation, whispered about by relatives, hidden in the shadows of the millionaire's reputation. The boy grew more withdrawn, avoiding eye contact, terrified of the look of disappointment on his father's face. At dinner, silver forks clinked against china plates, but the silence between father and son was louder than anything else. The boy's world was shrinking, and inside it he felt trapped, lonely, and invisible. And then, one evening in the garden, something unexpected happened. The new maid, who was usually silent, noticed the boy sitting alone under the oak tree with a torn notebook on his lap. She could have walked past. After all, it wasn't her place. But instead she paused. She saw the frustration in his clenched fists, the shame in his lowered eyes. Quietly, she asked if he needed help. At first, the boy laughed bitterly. How could a maid, someone dismissed daily by his family, teach him what trained tutors couldn't? Yet there was something in her eyes, not of authority but of understanding, that made him hesitate. That night, for the first time, he allowed her to sit beside him. She explained concepts differently, not with big words or rigid rules, but with stories. She turned science into life. The movements of the stars became more than numbers. They became journeys, adventures across the sky. The structure of atoms wasn't just dry theory. It was like a dance of invisible partners bound by unseen energy. The boy listened, and for the first time he understood. But in the household, eyes were always watching. Servants whispered about how much time the boy was spending with the maid. His father noticed the change. His son lingering in the garden longer, sneaking books into his room. Suspicion brewed. Could it be possible that the son of a millionaire was learning not from scholars, but from someone his family barely acknowledged? The boy's grades began to change slowly. First a small improvement, then a passing score, then something remarkable. Behind the closed doors of his father's study, papers were reviewed, signatures checked, and eyebrows raised. The results could not be denied. But to the family, the truth was unacceptable. For how could they ever admit that their son's success was not bought with wealth, but taught by a black maid they never respected? And in that silence, between pride, prejudice, and fear, the storm was building. The turning point came on a bright afternoon in the garden, the very place where it had all begun. The boy had just returned from school, his hands trembling as he clutched the latest science exam. His father sat nearby, sipping tea, surrounded by guests who admired the mansion's beauty and the man's wealth. The boy walked forward and placed the paper on the table. A perfect score, every answer correct, every problem solved. For the first time in his life, his father's eyes lit up with something the boy had never seen before: pride. But then came the question, "Who taught you this?" The room fell silent. Servants paused. Guests leaned in, curious. The boy opened his mouth, ready to speak the truth. He wanted to say her name, to tell them that it was the maid, the one they overlooked, the one they treated as invisible, who had shown him the beauty of learning. But before he could, his father's voice cut through the air like a blade. "It must have been your tutor." He smiled proudly at the guests, dismissing the thought that his son could have learned from anyone else. The boy froze. The maid, standing in the shadows with her tray, lowered her eyes. The boy's heart pounded. This was the moment, the chance to stand up, to break the silence, to give her the recognition she deserved. But fear wrapped around him like chains. He could feel the weight of his father's power, the judgment of the guests, the unspoken rule of the house: her place is not here. And so silence won. The guests applauded the father's wealth, the boy's progress, and the story everyone wanted to believe. But in that silence, something shattered. The boy knew the truth, and so did she. And the unspoken injustice, the erasure of her role, the denial of her worth, was louder than all the applause in the world. The garden, once a place of learning and hope, had become the stage of betrayal. That night, long after the guests had left and the mansion grew quiet, the boy sat awake in his room, the exam paper still on his desk. The applause of the afternoon echoed in his ears, but it felt hollow, because he knew whose hands had truly shaped his success. And he also knew that silence had made him complicit in erasing her. Downstairs, the maid sat alone in the servants' quarters. She held no recognition, no praise, no acknowledgement of her effort. But she didn't need paper or applause to know the truth. In her heart, she carried the pride of having changed a life, of showing a boy that he could be more than his failures, even in a world that refused to see her as worthy. The next morning, the boy found her in the garden again, watering the plants. He wanted to say the words he couldn't speak in front of everyone. But when he opened his mouth, all that came out was a whisper: "Thank you." She gave him a soft smile, the kind only those who carry quiet strength can give, and returned to her work. Years later, that boy would remember her not just as a maid, but as the teacher who saved him from failure. He would realize that the silence of that day had been the loudest. Lesson of all, that racism does not always scream. Sometimes it erases, it dismisses, it silences. And the question that lingers is not about him, but about us. How many more voices will be silenced before we learn to listen? How many lives will be rewritten to erase the truth of who shaped them? This is not just one boy's story. It is a reflection of countless untold stories. And until we honor them, history will keep repeating itself. And that's where the truth lies. Not in the applause of privilege, but in the silence of those erased. If this story left you thinking, ask yourself, how many more voices will be silenced before we finally listen? If you felt this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because these are the stories the world needs to hear. And trust me, the next story will stay with you long after it ends.